Imagine turning on the tap in your kitchen and just nothing comes out.
Right.
And not because there's a local drought or like a pipe burst down the street,
Right.
but because a massive artificial intelligence brain miles away just essentially drank the city dry.
I mean, it sounds like complete science fiction or, a scene from some
Yeah.
dystopian movie.
Yeah, totally.
But that scenario is the exact kind of physical tension that is building up right under our feet as we speak.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a really fascinating April 2026 Intelligence and Structural Analysis report. It's called the MGF News Regular.
It is a phenomenal report.
It really is. And our mission for you today is to step completely away from the noisy, emotional headlines of the daily news cycle.
Because honestly, those can be exhausting.
Exactly. So we're going to use a unique analytical framework from this report to look past all those flashy impressions. We want to see the underlying structures of how the world actually runs.
Because if you just rely on, say, the push notifications on your phone.
Oh, the constant buzzing.
Right. You end up seeing just a series of isolated random events, like you get a headline about a shipping delay, then maybe a headline about a tech company abandoning a project.
And then something about a Wall Street fund.
Exactly. But when you apply this structural lens, you realize they aren't isolated at all. I mean, they are all exactly the same story.
And that story is this massive hidden structural shift happening globally right now. It's this violent mismatch between incredibly fast-moving systems.
Things like algorithms, high-frequency trading, instant diplomatic tweets.
Yeah, all of that crashing into incredibly slow, stubborn physical realities. So today we're going on a journey to see how global passageways, financial liquidity, and physical city infrastructure are all being drastically repriced.
It's essentially the software of the world crashing into the hardware of the world.
I like that.
The digital realm wants to move at the speed of light, but the physical realm, it's bound by concrete, water, and geography.
Okay, let's unpack this by starting out on the water. If you've been following international news at all, you've likely seen the headlines about the recently brokered U.S.-Iran ceasefire regarding the Strait of Hormuz.
Right, which is major news.
Huge. And on paper, it sounds like great news, right? The diplomatic switch is flipped, the strait is suddenly open, and you'd think global trade would just instantly go back to normal.
You would think that.
But according to the intelligence report, which is pulling from Reuters, major shipping lines are absolutely not bouncing back, like at all.
No, they really aren't.
The report says it could take up to 2 months for anything resembling normalization. Plus, Iran is looking to implement a new transit fee system. So why is there such a massive lag?
Well, it really comes down to the fact that the world doesn't operate on a simple binary of open or closed anymore.
Right.
We are shifting into a reality where major logistics corridors are highly conditional. I mean, they are high-cost, high-alert environments now.
Okay.
So to understand that 2-month lag, you really have to look at the mismatch in speed.
You mean the fast diplomatic signals versus the slow physical ships?
That's the core of it, yeah. The fast-moving elements are the politicians and the militaries. A ceasefire document is signed in a single day.
Right. A military order goes out instantly over radio.
Exactly. But the slow-moving realities involve thousands of moving parts. First, you have the maritime insurance markets.
Oh, wow. Right. The actuaries.
Yeah, actuaries have to sit down, look at the completely new geopolitical landscape, and recalculate their risk models for a massive container ship floating through that specific strait.
Which takes time.
A lot of time. And then you have port scheduling, which, is planned months in advance. You have to physically recalculate the routes. You have to refuel the ships, reposition the crews.
So the military moves at the speed of sound, but the shipping industry moves at the speed of an insurance adjuster.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's like a major interstate highway.
Yeah.
Let's say it technically never closed.
Yeah.
But suddenly, overnight, someone installed an unpredictable, incredibly expensive toll booth right in the middle of it.
And surrounded it with armed guards.
Right. Sure, you can physically drive your car on it, but if you run a major trucking company, you're going to think twice before sending your entire fleet through that specific route.
You're going to wait to see how much that toll fluctuates.
Exactly. But let me push back here for a second. Won't this eventually just settle down? Like, once the ink dries on the ceasefire and a few months pass, won't shipping eventually return to those nice, cheap 2023 prices?
I mean, that's the intuitive thought, certainly.
Yeah.
But the structural analysis tells us why it probably won't. The vulnerability of global energy and logistics is no longer just about the physical availability of oil or container space.
So what is it about?
It's now heavily dependent on the political conditions of passage.
Ah,
Even if a cargo ship isn't actively being fired upon, just the fact that it operates under a persistent threat or is subject to a newly imposed geopolitical transit fee means that risk is permanently priced in.
priced into the insurance policies.
Right, and the overall freight costs.
Ah, so you're saying this creates a permanent structural inflation.
Yes. If every single container of electronics or, barrel of crude oil has a geopolitical risk premium permanently attached to its journey.
It sets a new floor.
Exactly. That embeds a baseline level of inflation into global supply chains. The physical water might be clear of debris, but the logistics operating system managing that water has permanently hardened.
Which means the cost of manufacturing raw materials, the cost of agricultural chemicals, basic goods, all of it goes up.
Yep.
And you and I end up paying for it at the grocery store or the electronics shop. It just happens on a delayed schedule.
The fast world gives a green light, but the slow reality imposes a toll and a speed limit.
That is wild.
And taking that concept a step further, what we're seeing on the oceans is just the physical manifestation of this trend. We're actually seeing the exact same dynamic play out in spaces you wouldn't expect.
Which is where I have to admit I'm a little confused.
Yeah.
Because I'm struggling to see the connection between physical shipping lanes in the Middle East and Wall Street credit funds.
It seems like a leap, right?
Yeah. How does the same fast-slow rule apply to invisible money?
It's a great question because finance feels like it should be the ultimate fast-moving system. It's just numbers on a screen.
Exactly.
But the financial membrane is experiencing the exact same thickening as those shipping lanes. The report highlights a quiet, almost entirely under-the-radar trend happening right now in private credit.
Right. The report mentions some really heavy hitters in the financial world. Major private credit funds, we're talking about firms like Barings, Blue Owl, Apollo, BlackRock, they are all instituting redemption limits.
Yes.
For example,
Yeah.
Barings quietly capped investor withdrawals at 5% for the first quarter of 2026. This was after they saw a massive spike in people asking for their money back.
This is a textbook example of what the structural analysis calls the illusion of liquidity.
Okay, break that down for us.
To grasp why this is so critical, we have to look at the mechanics of the financial markets over the last decade. During that long era of near-zero interest rates, traditional savings accounts and bonds weren't paying out much.
Right, you got basically nothing from a savings account.
So private credit ballooned. Investors were desperate for yield, and these private funds promised high returns with perceived stability.
But these funds aren't like regular checking accounts. It's not just a vault full of cash sitting there waiting to be handed back.
Far from it. These aren't highly liquid public stocks that you can sell in a microsecond on a trading app. The underlying assets in private credit portfolios are incredibly slow-moving, illiquid things.
Like what?
We're talking about massive commercial real estate projects or debt packages for unlisted private software companies.
Oh, I see.
And here's where the tension snaps. Artificial intelligence is currently upending the software market. It's cannibalizing a lot of traditional software revenues.
Right, because AI is suddenly doing the tasks that these traditional software as a service or SaaS companies use to charge businesses a monthly subscription for.
That's the exact mechanism at work. These private software companies are seeing their revenues severely pressured by AI competitors.
Which means the debt they owe to these private credit funds suddenly looks much riskier.
Exactly. Investors look at their portfolios, they see the risk rising, and they say, hey, I want my money back from the fund. Now.
So the promise of liquidity, like the investor logging into a portal and clicking the withdraw button, is instantaneous. It's incredibly fast.
Yes.
But the actual mechanism for the fund to get that cash, to give back to the investor, like having to go out and sell an illiquid commercial office building or restructure a struggling software company's debt, is painfully slow.
It takes months, sometimes years.
Like 500 people trying to exit a crowded underground parking garage at the exact same time. But there's only one payment gate at the top of the ramp.
That is a very apt analogy. The speed of the demand completely overwhelms the physical reality of the exit.
Wow.
And what's fascinating here is what happens next. This is what makes it a structural shift rather than just a headline panic. This isn't a loud, chaotic 2008-style bank run.
We aren't seeing lines around the block or panic on the trading floors.
Right, because the gates just quietly lock at 5%.
Just a polite email saying, sorry, you have to wait.
Exactly. It is a quiet hardening of the financial membrane. The funds aren't collapsing. They are simply telling investors, you can't leave yet. We don't have the liquid cash.
So capital is quietly being trapped.
Trapped and reselected. And the real-world impacts of this, which look like mid-sized companies not getting the loans they need, or businesses freezing their hiring.
Or corporate expansions completely stalling.
Yeah, all of that will hit the real economy on a delayed schedule. Again, the fast demand for digital cash is hitting the slow, stubborn reality of selling physical assets.
Okay, so we've got slow physical ships and slow financial assets. Let's take this fast-slow mismatch to its ultimate logical extreme.
The fastest moving sector on the literal planet.
Yes, artificial intelligence.
This is where the structural friction becomes impossible to ignore.
I found a statistic from the intelligence sources genuinely shocking. By 2025, North American data centers were projected to use about 1 trillion liters of water.
It's an unfathomable amount.
1 trillion. And U.S. power demand is hitting all-time historic highs right now in 2026 and 2027.
Which is entirely driven by this boom.
Right. And because of this massive physical drain, tech titans like Amazon, Microsoft, and Google are actually abandoning major mega data center plans.
And it's not because they don't have the capital to build them.
No, they have endless money. It's due to intense local community pushback and total resource exhaustion.
It represents a massive shift in the fundamental bottleneck of the tech industry.
How so?
Well, for the last few years, the entire narrative around AI was simply, can we secure enough GPUs?
Right, the graphics processing units, those highly advanced microchips needed to train the AI models.
Exactly. It was entirely a silicon competition. But the structure has shifted. The bottleneck is no longer the microchip. It has shifted to what the report calls urban capacity.
Urban capacity, meaning the city itself, the physical town where the servers live, is the limit.
Yes. AI software demand scales infinitely and instantly. I mean, you can update a language model algorithm and deploy it globally in seconds.
Boom.
But power grids, municipal water reservoirs, those take decades to permit, fund, and build.
So the new fundamental question of the tech boom is whether a city's physical operating system can handle the load.
Its water rights, its electrical substations, its community zoning laws, can they actually handle the staggering physical reality of hosting the cloud?
So what does this all mean for the big tech companies? Because I have to ask, why can't these tech giants just build these massive data centers in the middle of nowhere?
Just put them in a desert somewhere.
Yeah, find an empty patch of desert, put up a massive farm of solar panels, and leave the cities alone. Why do they need these specific urban locations?
It's a logical question, but it underestimates the sheer complexity of the infrastructure required. You can't just drop a massive AI data center in a true void.
Why not?
First, you need incredibly robust, redundant fiber optic networks to move the massive amounts of data in and out.
Okay, that makes sense.
Second, you need highly skilled labor to run, maintain, and secure the facilities. And third, increasingly, because of investor pressure and corporate mandates, you need ESG compliance.
Right, ESG, environmental, social, and governance standards, meaning they can't just hook up to a local coal plant to power these things.
Exactly. They need access to large-scale, reliable green energy grids, not just standalone power sources that might fail if a cloud covers the solar farm.
So they are completely tethered to civilization.
And civilization is increasingly saying, hey, we don't have enough water or power for you.
Wow.
The competition isn't just between Microsoft and Google anymore. It's a competition between cities to see who has the physical membrane strong enough to host the future.
If your city's power grid is weak or your water supply is precarious, your region just loses out on the AI boom.
Completely. Which brings us perfectly to the final piece of the puzzle. This is where we look at the hidden maps.
Yes. Because if we synthesize everything we've discussed, whether it's the conditional logistics of the Strait of Hormuz, the illiquidity gates in private credit, or the water shortages stopping AI data centers,
The underlying narrative is identical.
hyperfast operational systems are violently crashing into slow physical constraints.
The software is too fast for the hardware.
And this intelligence report actually gives us specific, under-the-radar examples from around the globe that prove this dynamic is actively rewiring the world map.
It suggests we have to stop looking at traditional borders drawn on a globe. The real maps moving forward are resource corridors.
This is a vital conceptual shift. The geopolitical map is no longer primarily about which nation owns what plot of land.
It's increasingly about who controls the entire vertical stack of a resource, from the ground to the finished product.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Look at the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The U.S. is actively backing the restart of the Chamath cobalt and copper mine. Or look at Uzbekistan,
Yeah.
where the U.S. just signed a critical minerals framework that covers everything from exploration to processing.
Right. And if you just read the surface level news, you might think, oh, some mining news in Africa, some diplomacy in Central Asia, moving on.
Exactly. But the structural read is that the U.S. is physically rewiring the operating system of global supply chains.
They are establishing secure resource corridors to diversify away from reliance on China.
They are putting in the decades of slow, physical labor to secure the rocks needed for the fast digital future.
And we are seeing the exact same dynamic play out at the city level, not just the national level. Like we noted earlier, cities are the new competitive arena.
The report highlights some fascinating urban OS winners emerging right now. But let's slow down and look at a few of these because it's so concrete. Take Japan, for example. The city of Kumamoto isn't just building a new TSMC 3-nanometer semiconductor fab for 2028. And a 3-nanometer fab, by the way, is a facility that makes the absolute most advanced microscopic computer chips on Earth.
It's cutting edge.
Beyond cutting edge. But to make that factory a reality, Kumamoto is having to restructure its entire local operating system.
It's a monumental undertaking. I mean, it's not just pouring concrete for a building. They're having to completely revamp the local water supply system because fabricating chips requires massive amounts of ultra-pure water.
Right.
They are overhauling the local power grid to ensure uninterrupted electricity. They are even having to restructure their local educational talent pipelines to ensure they have the highly specialized workforce required.
The physical effort required to support that massive industrial load is just staggering.
And it's happening everywhere.
Look at Brazil. The Porto Alegre region is receiving a $2 billion, 200-megawatt data center investment.
$2 billion.
Right. And why there? Because the industry has to physically diversify away from heavily loaded, exhausted electrical grids like the one in São Paulo.
So the physical reality of the São Paulo's infrastructure limit is actively forcing capital to find a new home in Porto Alegre.
It's a perfect illustration of capital flowing away from friction.
It really is.
And my absolute favorite example from the report is Haiphong in Vietnam. They had a massive 4.8 gigawatt liquefied natural gas power plant officially on the books.
They were completely ready to build.
Ready to go. But because of geopolitical gas shocks, the exact kind of permanent transit inflation and shipping delays we talked about earlier regarding the Strait of Hormuz.
They are abandoning the gas plant entirely.
Entirely. They are pivoting the entire city's energy strategy to renewables.
Yeah.
Think about that. The physical friction of global shipping lanes halfway across the world literally rewrote a Vietnamese city's entire energy grid.
This raises the essential question for you, the listener, to consider the next time you watch the evening news or read a financial alert.
What should they be asking?
Don't just ask if there is a crisis. Ask, where is the tension building up? Where is a fast digital or financial system trying to force its way through a slow physical membrane?
Which brings us to our summary. If you want to understand the trajectory of the next 2 years, do not get distracted by the flashy high-speed headlines.
Look for that membrane tension.
Look specifically at the intersection of urban infrastructure, power grids, data centers, and water rights. The fast world AI algorithms, high-frequency finance, instant diplomacy has officially started to be filtered by the slow, stubborn reality of the physical world.
And the most important thing to realize is that this physical reality isn't abstract. It is mostly municipal.
It's local.
It's the water pipe under your street. It's the local electrical substation. It's the community zoning board meeting.
Which leaves us with a fascinating and honestly maybe slightly unsettling thought to wrap up today's deep dive. We spent a lot of time today talking about how local urban capacity is the ultimate bottleneck for the future.
It functions as the ultimate physical filter for global progress.
So here is something for you to mull over as you go about your day. If local urban capacity things, as mundane as city water rights and regional power substations, is the absolute limiting factor for the entire global AI revolution,
Right.
will we soon see individual cities wielding the kind of immense geopolitical power and border control that has historically been reserved only for sovereign nation-states?
It's a huge question.
Like, if a city council controls the water for the AI, do they effectively control the AI?
It's a profound shift. I mean, it completely flips our traditional understanding of global power structures on its head.
It really does. It's like we said at the very beginning of the show. If you look at the world right now, you aren't going to see a clean, simple story.
The old diagnostics just don't work anymore.
But if you look closely at the muddy waters, you stop looking for the flashy headlines and you start looking at the friction.
You look at where the fast-moving digital muscles of the global economy are violently pulling against the slow-moving, stubborn skeleton of physical reality.
That's where the tension is. And that's exactly where the future is being decided.